So this is called this is the cycle of violence. And so basically, an organisation called Duluth in Minnesota in the States, United States of America, they come up with these. They do a lot of research, a lot of work in the area of domestic violence, and they come up with these wheels. Now, these wheels need to be used in extreme cautions because sometimes these wheels probably won't suit a situation. I've got a couple of wheels here that I'm going to be looking through. But this gives you an idea. It's not the be-all and end-all, but just if you're starting out in counselling and you are starting out working with domestic violence or victims and survivors of domestic violence, then we need to understand that there is a pattern to the abuse. There is things that happen for people, but it's not. This isn't like the golden egg. This isn't like this happens for everybody. This is just as an example of what might occur, how she might feel. So it's just an example, but it's not the be-all and end-all. So the batterer, like the acute explosion moment. So they've had the big explosion. Sorry, and there might be some of these examples being used here. There might be humiliation. There might be imprisonment, beatings. There might be choking, all that sort of stuff. And in her response to that, she might have called the police. She might have tried to fight back, so that's the moment that's happened. So what we've got to be really mindful of is that there will be like a remorse phase, what's called the honeymoon phase here. And so often the batterer would try and, because what happens now, there's this massive distance between the relationship. So she's actually going off on distancing herself. She's removed herself from the situation, or she's just not communicating or something like that. The morning after, he's getting up and she's going, oh, what have I done, sort of thing. And so what they'll try and do, the batterer will try and reduce the distance, this emotional distance or this physical distance, to get her back into, or get back in her good book, so to speak. And he will say he's sorry, or he'll ask for forgiveness, or he'll do a whole list of things. That she may do some of this stuff. She may agree to stay or return. She may want to stop the legal proceedings. Maybe there's a restraining order in place and all that sort of stuff. She may agree to set up counselling for him. She will take responsibility for it, unfortunately. And so if you're working with a victim of domestic violence, what we need to be really mindful is that she might actually then start taking responsibility for the relationship. We need to sort of educate them that that's probably not the best way to go. What we need to do is work, if you can, if it's in your scope to do so. The batterer needs to take responsibility, or the perpetrator needs to take responsibility. It's not for her to take responsibility. She's done nothing wrong, all right? And we can't say, oh, you need to do this, this, and this, and that to her, because that would be absolutely unethical. What we need to do with the perpetrator is go, look, mate, this is your behaviour. You need to take ownership, and we need to see you take ownership. You need to be accountable, and the process would be maybe through counselling, maybe through group work, where he starts to learn to understand his behaviour, take responsibilities for behaviour, get a good attitude around that, and then start making genuine progress, genuine change. Authentic change is probably the words that we would use. We need to see better word, we need to see, we'll get there, we need to see demonstrated change. So it's okay, it's one thing to say sorry, but we need to see you demonstrate that through behavioural changes. And there's no way that we would get the victim to ever be responsible for that, because it's not her responsibility, it's the perpetrator's responsibility. Now, if it all goes well there, it ought to end there, but wisdom always says that maybe there is some things that are going on and they do come back together again. So tension's building. It's called walking on eggshells. Now, it's an interesting phenomenon, this eggshell walking experience for people. It gets to this point where he's gone through the sorry phase and he's gone back to his normal behaviour. And she's now feeling like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I feel like he's going to do that. Now, what I come to understand in my experience is that she actually may, and this is not all the time, I've only heard this a couple of times, so it's not, this is more anecdotal than anything else. She actually may provoke the situation to get through the walking on eggshells, to get through the tension, because the explosion for her may be better than the tension that she's experiencing in this phase. So the reality, again, it's about the perpetrator being responsible for his moodiness. It's not her fault that he's moody. It's not his fault, not her fault, sorry, that he's drinking or doing drugs. It's not her fault that, you know, crazy making behavior or is threatening or yelling or putting you down. This is all him. And so she's just resisting. So there's some resistance in here. She might, for the sake of, you know, for the kids and for the sake of her own family, protecting her own family, she might actually just stay away because that's resisting. She might actually, she might try and cook his favorite dinner in terms of, you know, resistance. So like, I'm resisting you, I'm not giving in to you, but I'm just going to go through this process. So the term of resistance is quite here. She might remain silent as a term of resistance and all this sort of stuff. So there's lots of things that women do in these moments that might not be overt in terms of defending themselves or resisting the violence that's occurring for them. But they might do these really, really subvert things that we just probably not quite conscious of, that they're actually showing resistance to his behavior. So in counselling, the resistance is what you need to look for from her. Say, well, how are you resisting this? How are you resisting your partner's abusive behavior? And for the batterer, saying, where's your responsibility in all this? How are you taking responsibility? How is your behavior in all this? When are you going to take responsibility? When are you going to choose a better behavior? Because most of the time, and a lot of the time, every time, it is about choice. Like I said, he could come home and yell and scream at his wife, but go to work and he may be the really nice guy and things happen, but he won't yell and scream like he would yell and scream at his wife. So it really is a choice coming down to that. Hopefully that's been helpful. Hopefully that's been clear. Cool. Can we have the next slide, please? So this is the parent control wheel. So these, again, this is another wheel, but it's not the be all and end all. And it's just an idea that you can have a look at and go, oh yeah, okay, now I understand, or this is what I'm witnessing in counselling, or this is what she's saying. All right, because 9 times out of 10, or most of the time, women do, you'll get more truth out of a woman in terms of domestic violence than you will out of the man. All right, so that's just something to be mindful of. So when you're counselling a victim of domestic violence, these are the things that she will say, and these are things. Okay, so how can we help you in this regard? And if it's the perpetrator of domestic violence, we'll then say, well, you're doing this. Are you aware how this is affecting behaviours in the family? How's it affecting behaviour with children, and so forth? So the perpetrator will use intimidation. So that actually by making her afraid by using looks, gestures. He might smash things. He might destroy her property, abusing pets, and displaying weapons. So, that's something that you need to be mindful of and make a judgment call. Talk to your supervisor if you need to, do anything else, because you're all bound by ethics. You're all bound by agency policies and procedures, and the wonderful phrase called duty of care. We're all bound by that. So if someone's in immediate harm, I'm hoping and I'm assuming you know what to do. I don't have to talk about that. He may use emotional abuse. It's always a little bit harder to track this one. But, name calling's one, making her feel bad about herself, so destroying her self-esteem, calling her names, making her think she's crazy, playing mind games, humiliating her, making her feel guilty. And that making her feel guilty is probably a big part of that. So, like, look what you're making me do. I'm getting angry here. It's all your fault. And so there's that, I'm not taking responsibility, but I'm going to make you take responsibility for the abuse. And once you start hearing that language, like, oh, I made him angry, or I made the wrong meal and he got angry about that. And once you start hearing that, you know that that's a big part of emotional abuse that's occurring, and then you need to respond in the most appropriate ways for that. Using isolation, we sort of talked about that. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. Now, in my group work experience, this happens quite a lot. It was just a push, Kevin, they would say to me. But as we unpack it, what I come to realize, or what truth comes out in the end, that it was a push that put her through the window, and put her in hospital, and she had all these stitches. So there's those sort of experience. Oh, Kevin, it was just a slap. Oh, okay. And when we get to the truth of the matter, it was a closed fist in the eye socket, fractured eye socket, put her in hospital. So men in these situations will minimize because it's embarrassing. It's a lot of shame for them that they've just beaten up their wife and they don't want to deal with it, but they have to deal with it. They have to take ownership. They have to be accountable. They have to be responsible for their violence. Using children, pretty self-explanatory. Male privilege, so treating her like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle, being one to define men's and women's roles. So again, and it's just socialization. Again, it's about how we raise children, all that sort of thing. So I'm not going to focus too much. I think I've done a bit on that already. So using coercion and using threats and using economic abuse is really, really important. Can we have the next slide, please? So this is the equality wheel. See, it's all lovely. So parent control, dark, horrible. Equality, all nice and lovely. I kind of like that. Because the link between parent control and equality is simply attitude, attitude of the perpetrator. So the reality is simply this: if we can work intensely around getting him to change his behaviour and thinking differently around his family, getting him to think differently around all the issues that he's encountering, then we can start educating around non-threatening behaviour. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What's the experience here? And so talking and acting so that she feels safe, comfortable in expressing herself and doing things. Now that sounds really good. We all want that for everybody, not just in a relationship, but all friendships and all things that we're connected to. We want people to feel okay and to be able to be themselves. Respect goes without saying. I don't think I need to go into that. Trust and support, so she can feel that she's supportive in looking after the kids, that she's supportive and trying to achieve her life ambitions, her dreams and her goals, making her able to do those sort of things. Honesty and accountability, big part of it. Responsible parenting, shared responsibility and economic partnership. That's all a part of it. That's the big part, is the attitude. If you're dealing with people who are willing to address their behaviour, it's about getting them to own it, getting them to be responsible for their violent behaviour. Cool. Next slide.